In this seed to table video, I'm going to discuss the amazing world of the brassicas. These are plants with humble origins. All are descended from the wild sea kale prevalent on the rocky beaches throughout Europe and Britain. It is a large and diverse family of edible vegetables, and you can see it's just a humble little plant on the side. What makes it really interesting is that selections have been made over the centuries, which have resulted in the different cultivated varieties of vegetables we now know and eat today. They're also known as cruciferous vegetables due to their four-petal, cross-shaped flowers. All parts of the plants, no matter what variety you're growing, the leaves and the stems are edible. Some of them might get a little tough as they age, but when eaten young, they are all edible plants and delicious. Because it is such a large and diverse family, it's kind of been roughly classified into 7 different groups. And each of them just kind of make a reference to how the plant grows and what we're eating. So the closest to the wild form would be the greens, so collard greens and kale, pak and bok choy, mizuna, those types of things. Others are more about the heading out, so like cauliflowers and romanescos. Some of them will develop a rounded root, such as the kohlrabi and the turnip. They're all roughly the same, but they all are related to the original plant. Now, these are really healthy plants for you to eat. They're good for you. Your mother wasn't lying when she said, eat your brassicas. As I said, all parts of the plants are edible, and these really are nutritional powerhouses. They're packed with vitamins C, A, and B, lots of different minerals, calcium, potassium, and iron, and lots of fiber. And it depends on how they're prepared as to their flavor. And so when prepared properly, these are a very delicious and helpful vegetable. Now they're all pretty easy to grow. Most of them prefer growing in the cool temperatures of early spring, later in the summer. So they really makes them ideal for early spring and late summer plantings. They prefer a fertile, humus-rich soil, so having a compost-rich soil is very beneficial. They're also heavy nitrogen feeders because they do grow a large plant, leafy plant, that uses a lot of nitrogen. So adding a bit of a nitrogen-rich fertilizer before planting can really help. Now, because they like to grow when the temperatures are a little bit cooler, giving them a little bit of late day sun or late day shade during the heat of summer will be very beneficial. You want to keep the soil evenly moist, and the easiest way to do this is to mulch your plants well. They require 6 to 8 hours of sun, which is full sun. But if you can give that to them in the earlier part of the day versus the later part of the day, they'll be very thankful. Now, the plants are fairly shallow rooted, so you do need to be careful when weeding around the plants. And the best way to do this is just to mulch them. And then you do have to watch for pests because unfortunately, all the insects love our brassicas too. So let's look at how to do seeds or transplants. And there's pros and cons for each. So let's look at direct and indoor seeding first. You do need to look at your seed package and look at the maturity date. So there are varieties that are early, mid, and late. So you want to choose one that is going to kind of work in with when you're going to plant it. Now, there are some like the kohlrabi and the turnip, which form a root. They prefer to be direct seeded. That's not to say you can't seed them in a container and then very carefully plant them out, but it's just a lot easier just to seed them directly into the ground. And then you want to stagger the seeding dates every few weeks in early spring and again in late summer. And this is called succession planting, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But what it does is it prevents you from having a glut of produce that has to be used now, and it just spaces it out so you have a continuous supply. Now, if you're going to seed directly indoors and then transplant those seedlings outside, it's best to work back about 4 to 6 weeks from your preferred planting date. So let's look at the transplants. Now, there are some that do need to be taken out or put out as transplants. Cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage really are best by transplant. You can get away with direct seeding some of the really quick maturing varieties of cabbage and broccoli, but overall, I find it's just easier as a transplant. You want to transplant them seedlings when they're about 7.5 centimeters tall. And when you plant them in the ground, you want to go about 2.5 centimeters deeper in the pot. This gives them a bit of a sturdier root base and will make them stand up a little better. Now, they are quite sensitive to being left in their pots for too long. So 6 to 8 weeks is ideal. Any longer, and the plants can be stunted. And it doesn't matter how great a growing season we have, they're really never going to perform well. And because the seedlings are tolerant of light frost, don't be afraid to put them in the ground a little bit early, and they will tolerate a little bit of frost later in the season too. So here you can see my little pots of seedlings, and then I've transplanted them into the prepared bed, and I have planted them a little deeper so you can see the crowns where the roots come out or leaves come out are a little bit deeper, and then I've covered them just to give them some added protection. Now, unfortunately, the brassicas are bothered by a lot of different pests. And the one you're going to see early in the spring are flea beetles. These are little tiny black beetles that hop around, which kind of make them look like fleas, I guess. They feed on all brassicas, but are especially damaging to newly emerged seedlings. So anything that you've direct seeded that pops up, one moment you're going to have lovely seedlings, the next minute they're gone. They are attracted to canola. So if you live anywhere where they grow canola around you, you are going to see these guys. But there's a variety of weeds that they're attracted to as well as horseradish, nasturtiums, and perennial alyssum in the spring. They love hot and dry conditions. So if we have a dry spring, you're going to see these guys, and they will have a couple generations a year. And what you're going to see, the beetles are very small, but you're going to see a lot of these peppered holes, little yellow spots, and then bigger spots. And very quickly they will go in and damage. Even a transplant that has, more leaves can be seriously damaged and set back by these fellas. So they are a little less vulnerable, but still, you do need to give your transplants protection. The beetles dislike shade. They really like to be open in the sun. They don't like humidity. So planting seedlings, if you're direct planting, seed them a little more thickly. Some of them will succumb, but others will survive. And having a little bit of humidity deters them because they really like it dry. You can use a trap crop. So early mustard is a really good one in the spring. You can have some nasturtium seedlings going. I find the perennial alyssum gets devastated quite early on. So if you have these somewhere else in the garden, that's where they will go. The fun one is when you get to use a hand vacuum. And this works really well. Go out to your plants and just suck them up with your hand vac. And it can do quite a lot to get rid of a large number of these things. But really, the easiest method overall is just to cover the plants, any plant or seedling, immediately after you plant with a bug fabric. These let in light, they let in moisture, but they keep the pesky little critters out. Now, the other one that you're going to see that is probably the biggest pest of these guys are pretty butterflies and moths. So our native cabbage looper moth and the imported cabbage butterfly. You'll see these, you probably aren't going to see the moth. It's a night flyer, but you will see the damage. You will see the cabbage butterfly. It'll start to come out usually mid-July. And what you'll see one day, one, two, and then the next thing you know, you just got a fluttering field of these lovely little white butterflies. Now, the adults are not the problem. It's their larvae that are. And you can see they create these little green caterpillars that will go through, and they're voracious. They will easily decimate a plant in no time at all. What you will see first are these little gold to whitish eggs. And they'll be usually they're on the underside of the leaves, but occasionally they'll be on the top. So you can check your leaves every day and just sort of brush them off. But they do lay a lot. And when you start to see little tiny holes in the leaves, that's when you know you have the caterpillars. And they can be very small, but grow very, very rapidly. And when they grow, they create a tremendous amount of damage. So you can see these poor little Brussels sprouts got decimated. And the problem with them is that as they eat, they burrow into the plant or to the head here, and they're pooping along the way. And so you get this black frass that's in there that makes a real mess, but it also allows moisture in. And so you'll get other diseases. You can get powdery or mildews going on here, rot on the inside. And so really, once you get into them, there's nothing you can cut away. The whole vegetable is toast. So what is the easiest thing to do? Well, cover. Really, just like with the flea beetles, covering them as soon as they go in the ground and securing the edges so that nothing can get in just keeps everybody out. You can try Bacillus thuringiensis spray for the larva, and this is a spray that you put on, and you put just a drop of dish soap, not detergent, soap, mix up the BTK, and then spray it on the plants. Now, the larvae have to eat the bacillus, so you are going to get some damage, but when they eat the bacillus, it gives them a bit of a tummy ache, and then they stop. You can also use trap crops elsewhere in the garden. So nasturtiums work really well at this time of year. You can plant them further away, and they are a big attractant for these guys. So you'll get a lot of damage to them. It's not going to completely get rid of the damage to their wanted crops, but it will help divert the majority of them away. And then if your children are feeling a little bored and you want to give them something to do, go out with a butterfly net. This is what they used to do in the days before covers and stuff, is they would go out and they would actually capture the butterflies. So it can be a lot of fun capturing your butterflies and then you get to destroy them. Now let's talk about succession planting. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where you seed a little bit regularly. And so it gives you a nice continual supply of whatever crop you're growing. It can be really easy with the quick maturing varieties such as turnips, bok and pak choy, mizunas, kohlrabis, and kale. You can seed a little bit every couple of weeks because they mature so quickly, then you're going to have a continual crop. As the temperatures warm up, they bolt very quickly. So these are ones that you want to get early in the ground, keep going, and then about late June, stop for a while and then resume later on, later in the season when the nighttime temperatures are cooler and the days are a little bit shorter. Now, again, because they tolerate light frosts and cold soil temperatures, you can get these in the ground quite early. But transplants are also really useful when you're doing succession planting because as space opens up, you can pop in a plant and it just gives it a head start. And so you can do this throughout the season. Often it's not so much about the plant being able to grow through the heat of summer, it's more about it being able to germinate. So if you germinate them somewhere where it's a little cooler and then have a plant to pop in, then you can just keep going through the whole growing season. It will give you a head start with plants in the spring, and then it will also give you a little bit of a head start for planting in the fall so that you can have another harvest later in the season. And then you can use different maturity dates for a continuous harvest. So, for example, broccoli is a really good one. The Pac-Man variety is a short season, 45 days. The heads are not huge, but when you harvest the main head, you're going to get little side shoots developing. And those will keep you going until the large-headed variety, Green Magic, matures in about 70 days. When you cut that head off, it isn't going to produce any side shoots, but you can have some Pac-Man seedlings in the background that you can plant, and that will carry on the harvest again. You can also do this with cabbage, taking advantage of the different maturity dates. So the early Jersey Wakefield is a quick maturing variety, only about 45 days. It's a rather smallish head that's conical in shape. Um, and then we move into the red ball, which is a mid-season variety, about 65 days. And then into late season winter colobus, which is a beautiful, beautiful cabbage, gorgeous colors. But needs a long season to mature, 100 to 120 days. So giving it a head start is quite beneficial. It will tolerate quite a hard frost and will actually sweeten it. So you can take advantage of all these different maturity dates and have cabbage that will go right through the season. Now, let's look at some tips and tricks to grow each of these little types of plants. There can be some fun ones, like creating multiple heads on cabbage. Often you don't want a great big head, but you would prefer some smaller heads. So the easiest thing to do is when the plant is growing well, pinch out the center leaves and then make a very shallow X cut in the stem. This causes side shoots to grow. And so instead of one big head, you're going to get two, three, possibly four smaller heads all on one stem. Now, cabbage are also prone to cracking. They do like to have that consistently moist condition. But what happens when you go from a dry period and then suddenly you go to a really wet period? What happens is the cells expand with all that extra moisture, but faster than the tissues can grow, causing them to get a crack. So consistent moisture is the way to go. Mulch the plants. Harvest the heads when they're firm. Don't leave them in the ground for too long because they do continue to grow, and as they get bigger, they will crack. And one of the things you can do to help keep a head a little bit on the smaller side from getting too large is when it's growing well, just give it a twist. So you've already got a nice head, but giving that head a little twist that breaks a few roots will keep the head from getting huge and then prevent it from possibly cracking later on. Now, cauliflower, these are the divas of the plant of the brassica world. They are a little bit challenging to grow. They are sensitive to changes in weather, especially warmer weather. They can be slow growing and can be slow to head up. And some of the old-fashioned varieties, they have the white curd. They need to be blanched in order to keep the curd white. So that means you have to wrap the leaves over the top. Newer varieties can be purple, yellow. There's also a green variety too, which is quite nice. And some of the newer varieties of the white-headed don't require that step with the leaves to keep them blanched. So like I mentioned, they are susceptible to environmental stressors. So sudden changes in temperature or moisture levels will cause them to do some odd things. So one of the ones you're going to see probably most frequently with a sudden temperature change is something called ricing. And it's where you get these fuzzy curds. To me, they look like a whole bunch of sea anemones or barnacles that have released their tentacles while they're feeding. It doesn't hurt the plant, it doesn't keep it from being edible, but it just looks a little odd. You can also get a little bit of discoloration, so pink, purple, or an orange cast to the curds, especially in a variety that needed to be wrapped, that wasn't wrapped, or even if there's just lots of heat, you're going to see these faint colorations. It does not hurt the plant, it's still edible, but it won't be beautifully white. So if you have a variety that needs blanching, when the heads are about, 4, 6 centimeters, that's when you take the leaves and you carefully gather them over top and secure them. Not tightly, you want them loose so that the head can expand, and that will keep those curds nice and white. But either way, the heads are still edible. So if you don't get a perfect head of cauliflower, not to worry, you can still eat it. Now, Brussels sprouts are the longest maturing of all the brassica varieties. They're easily anywhere from 100 to 120 days, and they do take a while to get going. So you do need to start these as transplants. It's the same as growing any of the others. Get them in the ground, start them early, get them in the ground, keep them consistently moist, mulched, keep them covered. They're a little more challenging to cover because they do get tall. Once the spikes start to form, they can easily get 60 to 80 centimeters tall. So you have to give them room to grow upwards and keep them covered. What you're going to see about midsummer, hopefully, is you're going to see these little tiny sprouts that are forming in the leaf axils between the stem and the leaves. When that starts to happen, then you want to pinch out the top of the plant. And what this does is redirect the energy down into maturing these sprouts. So then you're going to get nice sized sprouts. And you can see as you get higher up, the sprouts get a little bit smaller. Now, these guys are very frost tolerant, so they can hang on well past a frost. The little cabbages actually sweeten after frost. And that's why we tend to eat these a lot of times, sort of in the Thanksgiving week. When you're ready to harvest, cut the whole stem off and then put somewhere cool or in the refrigerator. You don't want to cut off the little sprouts until you're ready to eat them. Now, turnips. Turnips need to be grown quickly and they need to be grown really, really well. So seed them in cool weather, grow them on very quickly, and pick them when they're small, really not much more than a golf ball sized. There are a number of pests in the soil that they are susceptible to. So this is one of these crops you want to move around a lot. Don't grow them in the same place, especially if you've grown another brassica in the same area. They're grown best early in the spring and then again later in the fall. And turnip greens have a really mustardy zing. Now, all brassicas are cousins of mustards, and so some of the greens are going to be a little spicier than others, but you notice this the most in the turnips. Some people love turnip greens. They add them to their salads, so you can grow them either for their little roots, their leaves, or both. Now, the greens, these are all plants, other than kale perhaps, that harvest or grow very, very quickly. And if you leave them too long, they also bolt very quickly, which means they form seed heads. So you can see these little pak choys. These are ready to harvest now. In another 2 to 3 days, they're going to send up a flower spike, and then they're still edible, but then the leaves aren't quite as sweet. So you want to grow these quickly. So plant them every couple of weeks, just a few, just enough to eat, and then you're going to have that continual supply. Uh, Most of the leaves, even kale, collards, the leaves are best harvested when they're small. They tend to be more tender, a little bit sweeter, and you'll just the flavor won't be as strong. Now, kohlrabi, you can eat the leaves of kohlrabi too, just like any of the other greens, but it's one that roots up. So it provides this big ball above the soil. It can be a little bit challenging to grow in a hot, dry summer because it needs a lot of water. Like, I mean, a lot. So you just keep plying on the water, keep them mulched. Now, the bulbs are best when small, but there is a variety called super schmeltz, which is one here, easily gets to be the size of a softball or larger. So you can see this is next to a head of Chinese cabbage. It was about probably a 3 pounder. And that super schmeltz isn't much smaller. So it can be a lot of fun. It's when this one gets big, it still stays sweet and not woody, whereas regular varieties of kohlrabi, if you let them get too big, tend to get a little woody and can be strong flavored. Now, in the winter, you can also grow brassicas. They are a great family to grow as microgreens. They're incredibly full of nutrition, easy to grow. You just sow in flats throughout the winter, and anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, you just cut them and put them in soups and stews, sprinkle on salads and sandwiches, and you have an incredibly healthful, fresh green to eat for the winter months. So thank you. I hope this has been educational, and I hope you go out and grow some more brassicas.